Good evening and welcome to the February 2023 meeting of the Common Council Ad Hoc Affordability Meeting. The meeting is being now called to order at 6:03 p.m. We will have roll call. Colliers present. Councilmember Greg Barnett.
Present.
Council member Jen McMurray will not be joining us tonight. Councilmember Brian Meek. Councilmember Nora Najelski Eichner.
Present.
Councilmember Darlene Young.
Here.
And Councilmember Diana Revolus is joining. I know she's having some technical difficulties, so she should be with us momentarily. So it seems as if we have a quorum. So we will continue with the meeting. Is there any public participation? Anyone in Zoom land would like to speak? Michelle?
It looks like we have two on tonight, one from East Norwalk Neighborhood Association and Nicole Eady. So if you'd like to participate, please raise your hand and we'll bring you over.
Okay, seeing, any Zoom hands? Seeing no Zoom hands?
No
We will-
hands.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. We will close public participation at this time. Please let the record reflect that Councilperson Diana Revolus joined the call at 6:05. Good evening, Diana.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. We will continue with the agenda with the approval of the regular meeting from October 27, 2022. Is there any corrections or edits of those minutes? Hearing it, seeing no edits and corrections, can I have a motion? We approve.
Motion?
Councilmember Burnett motioned, and it was also by Councilmember Diana Revolus. Seeing or hearing none, the ayes have it and it is so carried. Okay. Business will be the meat of our meeting tonight, which will be the review and finalization of the housing account ordinance to be forwarded to the Common Council Ordinance Committee. Before we open the discussion.
Councilmember Ayers,
Yes.
I don't
ma'am?
know if it's just me, I'm having difficulty hearing you. You're going in and out. Has anyone else hearing that? Because it could just be me.
No, I'm as well.
Okay.
Yes.
I do have, oh Lord, what I do now? See, I got some new technology, don't know how to work it.
Got to stick with the old stuff.
Ooh, can you hear me now?
Yes. Sounds fine to me.
Okay, I
Those are-
apologize. I got a new MacBook and I don't know how to use it, so it could be me. I apologize. I'll do better. So we are going to now review the affordable housing account ordinance that after our review and finalizing it will be sent to the Common Council Ordinance Committee. Before I open the floor for any comments or discussion, I would like to take this time to thank Brian and Adam from our Corporation Council department, as well as Nora, who really took a deep dive in editing and preparing this document with all of our suggestions and corrections for previous meetings. So thank you very much for that work. Are there any questions? Comments or concerns about the document?
You're asking if we have questions about what was presented, what was attached, correct?
Yes. Nora, I know you had something to I had a question, but I don't know if we have the same question.
Well, I guess so there's a couple of comments left on it from which we need council member input. But I don't know if you want to ask your question first. And then because the questions that are for the committee as a whole are flagged in the document. So if you have a question about the language or something other than the comments, then it might be helpful to talk about that first, and then we can talk about the remaining issues.
Absolutely. My question really was around, and I think it was flagged also, and I'm not phrasing it in the best way, but the reevaluation of, I guess, eligibility for landlords to maintain keeping the money. I think this is section. Section.
Is it possible, Madam Chair, to share your screen with the ordinance and go directly to the section where the questions are so we can see the exact wording? Or if we're all looking at it offline, direct us to what section you're questioning.
I will try to share my screen if you could bear with me for a moment. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question, if my, let me go down, it will not. Really, I gotta do like this? Crazy. Okay. I think is it there? Adam had, from Corporation Council, had made the observation. Nope, I think I passed it. That. Can I move this over? Nope.
It might be helpful if we can share the clean copy because the comments are really for those that were reviewing it as opposed to making their comments public. So is there any way we can share the clean copy
Well,
or?
You can't-
Actually, Mr. Burnett, this is actually the clean
That's-
copy. I had left on the clean copy the comments that I thought merited committee review as opposed to being more technical nits. So there are a few comments left on the clean copy.
I'm just concerned that, okay, if we can just remove
That's the
their
best. option.
comments. Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
President Nora, ask your questions while I find mine. I
Okay,
thought it highlighted
sure.
what you had.
So do you want me to share? Well, actually, you know what, let me just direct, if you want to just go back up to the beginning, the comments or the questions that remain from my perspective for committee decision begin on the top of the second paragraph on that page. Therefore, it establishes the affordable housing account. Okay. So yes, so exactly. So this second paragraph here, we had received feedback from the redevelopment agency at our, I think, October meeting. And they had requested that we broaden the purposes of the account because doing so would, in their opinion, increase our eligibility for certain federal grants. That said, it has been subsequently flagged to us by other folks who have commented on this that providing it or administering in particular are really very broad categories, and that further improving, maintaining, or repairing, also are really sort of oriented towards maintaining our existing housing stock as opposed to increasing our affordable housing stock. And so I think we can certainly go back to the redevelopment agency and, try to get a better understanding of, what providing and administering, does for them in terms of grant availability. But at a certain level, this is really a policy decision for this committee. How do we envision these funds being used? Are we comfortable with the possibility that they're used to repair existing housing as opposed to build new housing? And so I just wanted to flag that for the committee to discuss and consider.
So I have a question. So I had a concern with administering too, because what does that really mean?
Yep.
So does that mean that we're going to pay some organization or, to administer?
Right.
I don't know. It's just confusing to me, and I don't think that we want to spend dollars that way at all.
Councilmember Burnett?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see a need to go back to the redevelopment agency. I think the wording as we have it now is extremely broad, and we can and it's broad enough that as grant opportunities come available, we can look within this definition to see if it falls within this categories. I don't think it's possible to put every possible scenario in this one paragraph, but the way it's worded now, I think is fairly broad. We did remove some wording as it relates to, spending dollars for surveys. We were agreed that we did not want to use this account to be doing surveys. But as it stands right now, I would support the wording as is.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Revolus, do you have a comment on this?
Sorry, getting to my buttons are harder than I tried to. I do understand the broad between the questions that are being asked and what Councilwoman Nora Najewski Eisner and Councilor Burnett just stated. I kind of feel that it still puts us in the same middle of being too generic. You know what I mean? I'm just a little quiet because I don't know what to propose here. I think both are saying kind of the same thing in two exactly different ways. You understand what I'm saying? If possible, like one, it's broad and generic, so it could be a problem or a benefit on both ends of the spectrum. And I don't know where to go with that because you just both stated it is generic, but for two different ways it could really be an issue, which I'm a help or an issue, and I'm a little bit like I'm a little stuck here. I'm not gonna lie because of it's being generic,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm.
I think not an issue.
Oh, sorry.
If we're not, I know we're broad in our language, but if we're not identifying the administrative venue or issue or agency, is that going to come back to cause additional issues for these funds to get where we want them to go? That's the question. And I don't know if anyone has an issue. We know who we want these funds to go to, the population of people. If we don't specify how this is going to be administered, is it going to delay and or harm those funds from getting to that population of people?
I am wondering if, to your comment and to Councilmember Young's comment, if administering is maybe the concern. I mean, providing still has that clear emphasis on units, right? We want units. The whole point of this is to have units. Administering does seem like it maybe gets a little fuzzier. So perhaps we could think about leaving otherwise providing, but removing administering. Because I think the intent for administering was more on the idea of project management, administering the construction. But I hear Councilmember Young's concern as to that sort of potentially expanding into administering programs or, administering social services in the building or something. I don't know. That's the sort of, we want, as Councilmember Burnett said, we want this to be broad enough to allow us to qualify for grants and to use this money as matching money for grants. But we do, I think, have some desire to control what grants it gets used in relation to.
Agreed.
Okay. I thought I heard you coming. Okay, so can we make a friendly amendment to this document that we will leave the sentence as is, but will remove the wording or administering? Can everyone agree to that?
Yes, and are we going to do that in every case? So in B as well. So are we going to remove the word administering? Okay.
Yeah, no,
Okay
what
with
we've
that.
done, what we did with the previous revisions was we removed in every instance. So I can keep track of that.
I can agree with that, with the administrating part.
Burnett, are you okay with that? Okay. Catherine.
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Thank you, sir. Nora was the
Yes, so the next issue that I had wanted the committee to decide, so if we go just a little bit further down to 1-2, the makeup of the committee, which is just slightly farther down on the page. So the issue here is that we had initially, so the question is, should the redevelopment agency, which has tremendous expertise in this area, but is also highly likely to be one of our most frequent requesters for these funds, be on this committee, represented on this committee? And the same goes for the Norwalk Housing Authority, which again, it is hard to imagine more expertise than the Housing Authority and the Redevelopment Agency. On the other hand, it is probably those two agencies who will be the primary recipients, or at least partners on as, projects as the primary recipients of these funds. And if you have two committee members who literally have to recuse themselves for every decision, they are not useful committee members. On the other hand, to the extent that the committee's work is, for instance, developing the guidelines, et cetera, other areas where their expertise could be useful, it might be beneficial to have them. Although again, we also then run into the risk of a perception of bias if they have helped write the guidelines under which they are then going to be the primary applicants. So on balance, my personal preference, which I totally defer to the rest of the committee, is probably not to include them because I just think that their recusal is going to be so consistent. That said, if we do not include them, then we run the risk of having 6 committee members, which, as we all know, we try very hard to always have our committees have an odd number of people so that you never run into a tie vote. So I think that this version I sent as the clean, let me just count 3, 4, 5, 6. So the issue then is going to be, who would we then propose for a 7th committee member if we decide not to include the Housing Authority and the Redevelopment Agency? One possibility that I would raise for the council or for the committee to consider is that right now it's one staff employee of planning and zoning or a commissioner of planning and zoning. We could make it and, so that we have one staff member and one commissioner. That would get us to 7. So again, totally open for the committee's thoughts on kind of the makeup of the committee.
Okay, thank you. Committee, you've heard the recommendation and the suggestion. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would tend to say, excuse me, in our thinking, if we can avoid potential concerns down the line, I would err on the side of not including those 2 entities as part of the ordinance committee, the Affordable Housing Account Committee. If we have an opportunity that we feel may not be directed towards either of those entities, we can most certainly call on them for their advice and counsel without having them part of the actual Affordable Housing Account Committee. Obviously, we would have to ensure that whatever advice and counsel that we're asking of them would not result in them receiving that particular funding or grant, so that it wouldn't appear as if they had any influence on how it was directed to them. But I think we can most certainly call on their advice and counsel when needed, and utilize that expertise without having them specifically on the committee. Secondly, I do support the separating it out to get to the number of 7 by saying 1 staff employee from planning and zoning department and 1 from the commission. And I think that quickly and cleanly gets us to the number that we're looking for.
Thank you. Comment.
I agree with Councilmember Burnett and Ms. Nowojelski-Eichner about including the commissioner from the planning and zoning instead of the housing authority and the redevelopment agency.
Thank you. Councilmember Revoluz.
I also agree.
So I agree. I don't think we need any additional on that. So we can make that correction also in this.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm noting that correction right now. And then those are really the only issues that I think need to be decided by this committee. I did leave, and again, to Chair Burnett's point, I'm not sure if all of these comments were intended for public review, and so you may not want to show them on the screen, but if you go down, if the committee members want to go down to 1-4, which is expenditures.
Before we go to 1-4, quick question.
Sure.
Now I remember what my question was. When the line says 2 Norwalk residents living in affordable housing, one of which shall be an owner of said housing and the other residing in a rental unit. Are these people being appointed by the mayor?
Yes, the mayor is appointing all 7 of the committee members.
That was my question. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wait, the mayor is appointing the 2 council members?
No, sorry, the mayor is appointing all 7 members. So I presume that the council will tell the mayor which 2 council members they wish to have appointed, but I guess that's a fair question. We could double check with Brian Candela as to whether the 2 council members actually are just appointed by the council.
That's what I'm thinking. But
Okay, that's a really good catch. Thank you, Councilmember Ayers. I will.
Couldn't find it, but when I was like, that was my question. Yes, Councilmember Burnett.
Yes, as is written, and the intent was that the appointment of the entire committee would come from the mayor. And as we know, the council members can recommend to the mayor and have discussion to ensure that there is agreement on representation on any board or commission. So I really don't see this being an issue. If the council wants to recommend 2 specific council members to serve in this committee, I'm sure through dialogue and understanding, the mayor would be supportive of those appointments.
Okay, just wanted to bring it up so that my concern was documented. Any other conversation on this item? Moving right along, Councilman Nowojelski-Eichner, what's the next thing you want to bring to our attention?
Yes, so going down to 1-4, which is on the bottom of page 3. I just wanted to make sure that the committee had the opportunity to review these comments. My feeling is that all of these comments are really decisions that would be handled within the guidelines. But for instance, there is this question about whether we are imagining that individual homeowners could apply for these funds, or whether we really intend for the applications only to come from entities. I personally don't feel like we need to resolve that in the ordinance. That could be resolved by the guidelines. And by having both the individual and the entity in the ordinance, it allows for the opportunity, or therefore at some point for the committee to decide that they did want to receive individual applications. But again, I just wanted to flag and make sure that people didn't have opinions about that before we left it in the ordinance, and thereby foreclosed the possibility of limiting it to entities.
Okay, any discussion on this from the committee?
Yeah, that raises some questions for me. And it really just is around, and maybe I should have a clear understanding of this. But what are we really talking about when we're talking about affordable housing in the city of Norwalk? Are we talking about being able to build affordable housing? Or this just becomes an account that residents can apply to for particular improvements? It just is sort of so broad, because I think when we've been talking, I know that when I'm talking about affordable housing, yes, I think we need to, if they're homeowners that need to upgrade their place and are struggling with that, that's one thing. But that doesn't increase affordable housing in the city of Norwalk, right? So I'm struggling with what we're saying and what I think the vision of actually adding affordable housing to the city of Norwalk. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm struggling with this. So, I mean, is this going to become an account where people can apply to, similar to the redevelopment agency, to apply for funds for improvement? Or are we really looking to say, we want more housing built in Norwalk?
Well, for me, and
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, you did.
For me, and I'll let the committee speak on their own, I feel that we need more affordable units, and more pathways of affordability for housing. That is what I feel would best suit the people of our great city. This section caused me great pause because I'm kind of split, but I know at the end of the day, to have residents apply to help them with their housing is great, but that's not going to secure that other populations of people will be able to reside in our city bounds because they can't afford it. So when I see affordable housing, or when I speaking about affordable housing, for me, it's about affordable units. So that it could say affordable unit account for me, having affordable units that are in affordable pathways for home ownership for people. That's how I perceive it, but that might be my own point. But I think once this is sent to the ordinance and the committee can come together, I would hope to see in their action items the viewpoint of, let's get some more affordable units. And I would hope that their work would be guided by our preamble and our intentions of saying, this is really to make sure that affordable is just that units that people can afford.
And
Go ahead.
And I do think that there is some merit to be for we've got quite a few low income, affordable condominiums that have been built that need repair. I mean, so on the other hand, you have that, because that's an issue as well. But I don't know if I think I saw in here, or one of the comments, that someone was questioning whether landlords could apply for some of this money, correct? Was that in there? Did anyone see that?
Yes. And so a couple of comments on that. I mean, one is that by definition, probably most of the people, or many of the people applying for this, will be landlords, right? They will be people applying to build presumably a large number of units. They will be entities who act as landlords, right? So I think that I mean, in a certain sense, that is the intent, right, of this, or these are in some ways the likely applicants, right? The Norwalk Housing Authority serves as a landlord. So I don't think that we can prohibit landlords and still accomplish our purpose. I think the question that was being asked was potentially more oriented towards something like, could a person who owns a single family or a double house, a two-family house seek, funding for the unit that they rent out. And I think my inclination is that all of those questions are questions that could be resolved in the guidelines and shouldn't be resolved in the ordinance, because it's hard to predict what the best strategy might be. For instance, I could see the committee, the ad hoc or the Affordable Housing Committee deciding in a few years, maybe there's a state grant for ADUs and they decide to do matching funds to encourage individuals to build ADUs. I'm hypothesizing, right? I'm imagining. I have no idea if that would be something that we would encourage, but by having both individuals and entities here, we have some flexibility, and the guidelines certainly can. The guidelines would be what would restrict and say no small landlords, only nonprofit landlords who are, operating large scale developments or whatever. The other thing, though, that is important that I did add in here, based on some of these same questions, and you can again see the comments back and forth from me and Mr. Candela in response to those comments. All of these, we did add language that would require that all of these funds, all of the properties which receive these funds, be subject to the deed restrictions, which are imposed by the Norwalk Workforce Housing Regulations. And those regulations require that all of the affordable housing built using that funding, which is the funding that will be the basis for this account, be restricted in perpetuity to affordability. So it is unlikely, for instance, that someone who has a single Section 8 apartment, or really any Section 8 apartments, is necessarily going to want to agree to that deed restriction in order to get this fund. So there is a built-in level of protection here. And quite frankly, there are likely to be very few individuals who are going to want to agree to that. So that is an important addition to flag that is in the language. It's the last sentence right now, just above 1.4. So having that in the ordinance, so all funds deposited in the affordable housing account are subject to the deed restrictions imposed by the Norwalk Workforce Housing Regulations of the Norwalk Zoning Regulations, Section 118-1050, as amended and revised, whatever the source of funds. So if, for instance, the council or the budget were to allocate additional funding beyond the funds received through the workforce regulation, those funds would still be subject to that same deed restriction. So I hope, does that help alleviate some of the concerns potentially about the use of these funds and where some of the guardrails are?
Yes and no. And as a homeowner who is under such restrictive deed restrictions, I am totally against that. I think it has to be worded. I think we really need to look at that, because housing, particularly if you own your home, is supposed to be the way that you build equity, and deed restrictions restrict that tremendously. I think there needs to be, I think if that's the way that we go, we really need to look at that. I've lived where I lived for 30 years and there is a 99-year restriction on the property, which means none of us here will ever make enough money to sell our place and buy a place. Even if I wanted to stay here in Norwalk, I couldn't because of a deed restriction. That was not well thought out. I'm not sure what the current workforce development deed restrictions look like, but I hope that we take a really good look at that.
I do see Council Members Burnett before I recognize him. Is there any possible way those particulars could be worked out in the guidelines that have to be established? Or we have to work it out in this document? That's a question.
So the deed restrictions are in the zoning regulations. And as we all know, those zoning regulations are up for revision.
No,
And
that's
we'll
not
be-
what I'm talking,
Oh.
I know that part. I'm
Okay.
talking about the wording. Councilmember Young has voiced her concern about the wording. Can that be maybe worked out in the guidelines since we're leaving this document more broad?
in terms of the deed restriction point,
Yes.
no, because the deed restrictions are in the zoning regulation that requires developers to pay these amounts to the city, which are the basis for the account. So in theory, we could say that anything put into this account from pursuant to the zoning regulation is subject to those deed restrictions. But that amount put into the account under the regular city operating or capital budget would not be subject to those deed restrictions. I think as a practical matter, though, that would probably be almost impossible to carry out. I think we would probably, in essence, actually need two separate accounts, is my guess. So that's a question we can certainly ask Mr. Candela. He would really need to opine, I think, on that, because we're reaching the limits of my my knowledge on that.
That's fine. That's fine. Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we need to just step back for a moment to better understand the mission of this affordable housing account. And as Council Member Nora Nadelski-Eichner just pointed out, the funds that are going into this account are coming directly based upon those zoning guidelines. This account is not designed to be the end all for every single dollar that is earmarked under affordable housing. We will have an affordable housing plan. There will be other resources related to affordable housing. So this account is really to be a repository of those zoning funds that developers are currently, giving to the city that are just sitting in an account. We're creating guidelines as to how those funds could be utilized. So again, I want to emphasize this is not the end all for that. Every single dollar that is associated with affordable housing will be deposited into this account. There'll be other means, other resources available. Again, the affordable housing plan will help to dictate how those funds will be utilized. But I think we just need to step back and understand the true essence of this account, where the funds will be coming from, and the restrictions that will be associated with those funds as a result of their orientation based upon zoning and development and their requirement to deposit funds into this account.
Thank you for the clarity. Any other discussion in this section?
I'm sorry, I've gone through this. Just can you guys answer me? This is a complete question, but in particularly for the other pathways of affordable housing, air quotes. Just in this, where's the conversation of those that are developing stuff for affordable ownership? It's in the first part of the ordinance, but just wondering where's the support to it? I get housing, but where's the support to like the second paragraph? Hold on, let me just say what paragraph it is. More in the introduction, like the second, in A, the second part of just saying how second and third, just knowing about home ownership, and how it's a big part of equity and so on, and not equity use, and just summarizing it. What supports that?
So if you go to the very top, the very first definition,
Right,
we have defined affordable housing as being either the
Right.
annual cost of rent, utilities, or mortgage payments.
right.
Anything. So that then means that housing can be housing under this account can be created, affordable housing can be created under this account to either address mortgage or rent.
Okay, so that's my apologies then, because in my mind of just reading through everything, it just seems like, I guess in the knowledge, the conversation of how we use affordable housing so much that I hear it in the first part, but I now get that affordable housing overall is supporting the two, because I guess it's just my mindset, and maybe other people might when reading this, just because we use affordable housing, it's just units and rent, that it can kind of get lost because it's very present in the beginnings of this. It's just, I feel it gets lost in these conversations and the questions we're stating. The only closest was for Councilwoman Ayers. I don't know if that would be something that someone else would see further on along in the. I get it now. It just doesn't seem supportive, if that makes sense. Like, it just seems like it's talking one way, even though it's discussed in the beginning.
So I think just to further support what you're saying, the continued work of this council, the continued work of this committee would be what our next steps were. And in the development of our next steps, we can make sure that we are identifying pathways to affordable ownership and identifying other possible ways of affordable housing. But that's in the next step. I do want to
Okay.
reiterate what Councilmember Burnett said is this is our first step. It's not our last step, but we had to start somewhere. So this is our starting ground for us to do additional work.
I
And
appreciate it.
Councilmember Revelous, to your, I think, obvious, very realistic concern. I think that's part of why we do designate having a member who is an owner. Again, that's intended to reinforce that. And then it is entirely possible. So there's absolutely nothing in this that would preclude the guidelines that the committee issues. For instance, being that, in this year, they are only going to fund condos and co-ops. Or only going to fund pathways to ownership. I mean, those are all, I do think that the one point, and to the point that Ms. Young keeps making, this really is intended to increase. This is really intended to the physical structures. And so it is intended to increase the number of units. And so it would be oriented towards constructing condos or co-ops, not towards, helping facilitate people to apply for mortgages for existing properties. So that would be the one thing where it's not, it's not on that pathway, but it certainly is very much, it should be very clear in here. I hope that this could be used to construct housing for purchase. And that is also in the workforce zoning regulation that this refers to. There is clarity in that regulation that it is related to either.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's actually great. Thank you.
Yes,
For reassess.
Yes, Councilman Young.
Thank you. So when we say workforce housing, right? Right now, I think you could be a single person making, is it 70 to 90,000? And that's considered workforce housing. That's the first level of housing. I think as an individual, your income can be that much. So must we use that, those numbers for median income? But that's what it is, I guess. Is that what it is for workforce housing, or is there another median income protocol that is out there?
So I think that the regulation is called workforce housing, which is why we keep referring to it. But the regulation relates to housing at the 60% of median income, the 80% of median income, and the 100% of median income levels. I believe what you're referring to with the 70 to 90 would be closer to the 100% of median income. We in this ordinance are setting it only at the 60% of median income. So I can tell you, hang on a sec. Let me just.
Because I saw the numbers that I just mentioned and my jaw dropped. I thought this is unattainable for so many people.
So the median income in Connecticut right now is $80,000. If I'm reading this, I mean, this is based on a quick Google. So, 80,000 times 6, just to make sure so 48,000 would be, I believe, the approximate current ceiling for these, I believe. I mean, I don't want to, but that's based on Google, but yes, I think so. I think this is intended to provide housing to folks up to $48,000 of household income.
So I just want to make sure that's those numbers that you just mentioned are correct. Because what I just recently saw is much larger, much higher than that. When we
Right,
talk
so-
about workforce in this area, it's astounding.
Yeah, workforce, I mean, the broader workforce category goes up to 100% of median income, which would then be at 80 or 90,000 if it's for Fairfield County. But we chose in this ordinance to restrict it to the lowest, the 60,000 or 60%. The references to workforce are references to the regulation itself, which is titled that.
Okay.
But it doesn't require us. And in fact, I had some back and forth with Mr. Candela and planning and zoning to confirm that there was nothing in the regulations that required us to fund housing at the 80 or 100% level. And we ultimately came to the conclusion that there is not, particularly as they're in the process of being revised. So our ordinance would only allow these funds to be used for housing that is up to 60% of the state median. And we also chose to use the state median instead of the Fairfield County median. So that actually lowers it even farther.
Okay. All right, that sounds much better.
And I think that the reason, I should also say, we could not at this moment in time go below the 60 because the 60 is in the regulation in terms of, again, what the developers are paying the fee for. If we wanted to go below the 60, we would need to work with planning and zoning on the revision of the regulations to then have the developer section, the developer fee section match up with this. But I mean, that is conceivably something we could do if that's something the committee wanted to pursue.
Okay, any other additional conversation or questions about this document?
I had a question. I think it was just at the top. I think the first page, there was just, I think you took something out. It was the first. What happens when you, is that it? Where did you delete the first line or something? What is page, is this the page 1?
Yes.
This is it?
Yeah.
Housing. There was a spot where you deleted, you took out, let's see, affordable housing includes both housing for rent and for purchase. So that was omitted, right? That was taken out, or was that put somewhere else?
Yeah, so that was taken out of the definition because
Okay.
it is farther down.
Okay.
So basically we had in 2 places. So if you go to, hang on, I will find you where it still is in the document. So if you go to the preamble, if you could scroll down a little, keep scrolling down.
Okay, is it in B?
Hang on,
No, took it out of there too.
just make sure I'm looking at it on my marked up copy. So let me find it on my clean copy. Oh yeah, okay, so in the very last sentence of A, so on the 1.1, the preamble, the very last sentence of A, so right before B,
Mhm.
so the building of climate resilient affordable housing for rent and for purchase throughout the city.
Affordable housing includes, so you have taken out affordable housing includes both housing for rent and for purchase, and have just left it where you right here where you've just read it. Is that what you're saying?
Right, because I mean, we can certainly leave it in, but it's duplicative in the affordable housing definition, because the definition says that affordable housing is housing whose annual cost for rent or mortgage is less than 30% of the 60%. So it was just duplicative to have that last sentence there, because it
Okay.
literally just says it in the sentence above. But we can also leave it if people prefer to have it there. But that last sentence of the preamble is the purpose of the affordable housing account, right? So it establishes in the preamble, the last sentence establishes that the affordable housing account is for this purpose, which ends with for rent or for purchase. So we felt like it was fairly clear that the purpose is to provide both, or options for both.
Okay, right. Okay.
Councilmember Young, are you satisfied?
Yes, yeah. I had just had to read it over.
Not a
Yeah,
problem.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Any other?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other discussions on this document?
I did have some other thing in my head.
Did you write it down?
No, you heard in my head and it just flew away. So I'm just bringing these things up, and I understand we will get an opportunity to discuss them and flesh everything out. Will it be in the ordinance? The ordinance is going to allow us to be very specific.
So my understanding, and if I'm wrong, the former chair of this committee will correct me. This document is going to go to the ordinance committee and they have their process. I do not think it will be vetted by our legal team because they've been a part of this process.
Mhm.
So with anything in the ordinance, it has to go for public participation, where the public will be have the opportunity to weigh in, and then it would have to come to the full council. Did I say that correctly? I did my homework. And it would have to come to the full council. And so you would have another opportunity to address any unreadiness or anything else you would want to add, because it has to come back to us for the full council.
So I knew I should have wrote things down. So another thing just popped into my head. So when you think of committees and a committee like this, I think when we get residents, people who are not city employee, not with the city, not knowledge, not involved in some of these processes, but want to get involved. And to only have 2 residents, I mean, we're all residents, but to only have 2, and if one is gone, doesn't make a meeting, I think there's a sense of, you can kind of feel intimidated in some ways, when you're with folks who might be speaking and not speaking in a way that folks can understand sometimes, right? Because we like to use acronyms and we talk in our vernacular because we know that. But if I'm, someone that hasn't been engaged but wants to, and unfamiliar, it could be a little intimidating. So I said all that to say, could we increase the number of people, or is that not allowed? You can't do 8, you'd have to do 9.
Yeah, I don't think it's not allowed. It's just the number. So if you increase it, you're gonna have to increase it in more than one area to keep that odd number.
Right. So
But
we
we
need
certainly-
2 more people.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. We could do two owners and 2 renters. The only thing I would flag is that, as we all know, filling committee appointments sometimes gets challenging.
Yep.
And so we could potentially get some pushback on that, but I certainly understand your point, Darlene, about this being a committee where it's particularly important that non-experts also feel heard and get to weigh in. And so it certainly doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I don't know if other committee members have opinions on that.
Councilmember Burnett, your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My only concern is when you start raising the number, the size of the committee, it becomes harder and harder, A, to get representation on the committee, and B, to get a quorum to conduct business. So I think the number that we're at right now is a reasonable number to ensure that we can have the committee actually functioning and have a quorum. And we've experienced current committees and boards that, due to size and in some cases lack of participation, cannot even conduct business because they can't get a quorum. So I would advise against increasing the size beyond of what we currently have stated.
I just duly disagree. And I think we always stick with that because it's easy. And I think sometimes we've got to step outside of what we normally do and do it. I think we always do that. So I just, that's my position on it. But whatever the committee, of course, decides is what we do.
Can I make a friendly suggestion as the chair? Can we increase the number of residents to 3 and increase the number of council to 3? Because we'll show up. It's part of our job. I mean, if you're worrying about the guarantee, can we,
I think that makes it, and honestly, I was thinking that, but I just said at least one more person, but I think that's fine. And not just the council, I said maybe somewhere else, but I think that that's fine.
It was the first.
But
paragraph,
I think
so,
that's perfect. I agree.
just to get, and I do understand what you're saying. I want to be clear. I do understand for this topic to have community members, it's really, really important because they are directly affected by this. But I do also understand Councilman Burnett, who's saying, if we're being realistic and logical, sometimes it's slim pickings. But normally the council members, if we have a committee, we attend the committee. So I would offer that as a friendly amendment to increase the council member to 3 and increase the residents to 3, and then we still will have an odd number.
Could I make an alternate suggestion to consider?
Yes, you can.
So the other way we could do that is by increasing the residents to 3 and returning to having a staff employee or a commissioner of planning and zoning, as opposed to the and. So that would still keep the council at 7, which to Mr. Burnett's point, allows quorum to be 4, which is sometimes easier to manage, but does increase the presence of residents and decrease the sort of presence of people who talk in jargon. So that would be one option.
I'm just looking at so you're taking out this or.
Well, so what we had initially proposed was to take out that or and make it an and, so that would give us an odd number.
Yes.
But if we left that or in and increased the 2 residents to 3, we would still have an odd number.
Okay, I got you.
I'm counting it again to make sure. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we would still have an odd number. So that's another way of handling it.
I don't have a problem with that. That's fine with me. Ms. Revolus, do you have a feeling either way? No? Okay.
Ms. Young, does that?
I'm sorry, my phone, no, I'm sorry. It's causing me difficulty. Sorry.
Do you have a preference either way of the amendments, the friendly amendments that were raised?
No, I actually I actually agree with it, because especially with someone more our constituents being vocal and definitely understanding Councilwoman Young's speech about having intimidation in the room. I do think it would be fair that, you have the 3 for the council members that will show up, like you said, Chair, and then just giving a healthy support system to our constituents that would be a part of, and still in keeping us with the ability to conduct business. I'm for it.
Okay. Councilman Member Burnett, because you had the concern, how do you feel about the friendly amendment?
I'm supportive of the last recommendation of making it changing the and to an or,
Okay.
and increasing the number of
Council members,
no, not council members,
Residents.
the number of residents
resident,
from
all
2
right.
to 3.
Okay. All right. So we will also,
That keeps the number at 7.
yes.
Yes.
Can I correct it on here? Nope, it won't let me. All right, Nora, you're writing that down?
I am writing that down. I'm making that change right now.
So any other discussion of the document?
I had another, but I think this was supposed to be a quick meeting, right?
I never said that. I
No,
didn't
no,
say
no.
that.
I think that was it. I think that was it.
It's important work. It's important work.
It absolutely is. It really, really is. I think that was it. Okay. I don't have anything else.
Okay. Anyone else have any other comments, questions, or concerns?
So my last comment is just, I appreciate how we just negotiated that. I think that was perfect. We all got what we wanted. Thank you, Greg. So we have our 7, but we've got the extra, the other resident, and I think that this is a good start. So thank you, Nora, and to Chairman Ayers and you, Ms. Revoluz.
Okay, teamwork make the dream work.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Totally.
So we are going
Definitely.
to make, I noted 4 corrections. There may be more of this document. Councilmember Burnett, I need some help as the new chair. Since we are making these corrections, can we still approve it and then send it to ordinance, or what is the proper protocol?
The proper approach is that the committee has reviewed and agreed on all the changes to this current draft. I think the next step is to send it with the changes we discussed tonight directly to ordinance and let ordinance do their due diligence from this point. But the committee has completed their work up until this point.
Thank you for the correction. Learning on my feet. So can I have a motion for the corrected or updated draft to be sent to the ordinance committee of the Common Council?
Motion.
I heard Councilwoman Revoluz. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
It's unanimous. So we will send our updated document to the ordinance committee with the updated corrections. Thank you again. Let me stop sharing my screen. Yes, Councilwoman Young, you have your
So,
hand up?
and I meant to say this, and thank you to Councilwoman Nobilski-Eichner for your work on this, and to Greg, who was chair in the beginning, who got this going. So this is a really good start, and I'm very pleased that with the work that's been done. And thank you, Chair. And Michelle
second
for
that.
keeping us all in check. So this is a good start for the city.
Excellent. Right before we adjourn, I just want to say publicly that we will now have this committee meeting the 3rd Wednesday of every month. And even though we have completed this task, we do have other tasks that will be in front of us in the next coming months, and the work to do, such as having a affordable housing town hall, participating in that, organizing that, along with city staff, as well as the affordable housing plan, which will take all of our input. So those are the things that we will be working on going ahead, as well as I jotted some notes of some questions that came up from this discussion. Okay, does anything else that any other council person would like to share? Okay, that will conclude our meeting for tonight. Thank you for bearing with me as my first time being the chair. I hope I didn't do too bad.
Great job.
Do I get to say my motion to adjourn?
Is that your
I'm sorry.
motion?
That's a motion.
That's the motion. Good night, all.
Good night.
Right.